Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Paul Correa, and I'm joined by my colleague, Matt Penfold. Today, we're going to talk about the UK autumn budget. Um, yeah, it's a subject that can, cause a lot of distress and wind people up. So, Matt, what are your initial thoughts from what we know? I know we're entering a consultation period, so the dust really hasn't settled and there could be some tweaks. But what do we know about the autumn budget and what is your first impression?
Okay, well, we're trying to keep personal opinions to a minimum on this one today, but what we do know is anecdotally is the number of people since that budget reaching out to us saying, "Oh, can I move to Gibraltar?" is very high numbers, so to speak. So maybe that's a an analysis of the budget. But as you rightly say, Paul, it's November as we're recording this video. We're still digesting the budget and the consultation period is going through. So I think we will probably put another video out when that ends. It's a 12-week process. Um, because there are a lot of areas that are a little bit vague, haven't been clarified. Maybe there will be a little bit of kind of backtracking from the government because of the reaction as well. Um, just a kind of personal opinion, but the fact that there's so many areas that are unclear, it seems like some of these decisions were made a little bit rush and they haven't kind of considered the consequences of this or how they can um, actually kind of introduce these measures. Um, One thing that they brought in, which I think could be viewed as positive, is moving from for UK inheritance tax, moving from a domicile regime to a residency regime. So the domicile regime has always been a little bit kind of vague in the UK. People move out of the UK, but you're still caught by UK inheritance tax. Can you remove that? Whereas now we're moving to a residency requirement, which means you need to be out of the UK for 10 tax years. So it's a little bit clearer. There's a few more details in that about people who spent time away, but at least it's a bit clearer going forward. The one that I think we're still trying to get the kind of detail of is pensions as part of UK inheritance tax. Um, I think for those who don't know or haven't seen it, so pensions were previously outside of someone's estate for UK inheritance tax. They would now be included in your estate. I think that one comes in April 2027, Paul, is that right, for the pensions? Um, but whether or not that will definitely include all offshore pensions, there's a few kind of disagreements on that. So I think there's a lot of time to tell. Capital gains rates have gone up. Um, that's one of the motivating factors that we've seen from people wanting to move to Gibraltar. I think moving from the UK to Gibraltar and then realizing a large capital gain has always been attractive. As people may know, there's no capital gains here in Gibraltar, but with higher rates, that makes it more painful in the UK and therefore more attractive in Gibraltar. So a bit of a brief summary. Paul, would you like to share your thoughts?
No, I think it's taken a lot of people by surprise
Yeah.
because it's almost um, they've rolled it out on the budget is on ideological grounds. Um, so that's really, but even though it's a budget which is ideological in nature, I think actually it's working class and middle class, particularly in the UK, that are being hit by these measures, and that's the probably the most surprising thing. The aspirational middle class is again carrying the can for everyone else, and ultra high net worth individuals and people with large estates are not really contributing that much more from what we know. There's the issue with the farmers, could have been handled differently because that's essentially the food um, part of the food chain, food supply, and these are people that have owned the land and produced food over the centuries, and they're being taxed, and that can have implications for the supply chain. So that's surprising. And then, um, yeah, I think if you compare Starmer with Trump, the measures couldn't be more different. And I'm not saying they should be the same. One party is left of center, the other one is extreme right. But what you cannot do is to tax more and expect to provide more services, because one, there's going to be a mass exodus from the UK. It's not just people who qualify for the non-dom that are going to find other jurisdictions which are probably more interesting and with a lower tax burden. But people who generally reach retirement age and they don't want to be putting, the bill for a government that is, and look, the Conservatives were no better, but are misspending the money, and that is causing a lot of aggravation. We speak constantly with people who are planning to move, and those who've moved recently and are content knowing that they're not contributing their taxes to the UK because the mismanagement is quite significant. Yeah, and you have Trump on the one hand planning to reduce corporate tax rate from 21 to 15 to stimulate growth. I think Elon Musk is going to be appointed to head a department of government efficiency that could reduce um, waste by 20 to 30%. We already know what he did when he bought Twitter, or X as we now know it. He'll come in and he will, cut waste. He won't hesitate in doing that. I think that will reduce the recurring government expenditure. That's really a sensible thing to do, whether whether you are left or right of center. I think uh, any sensible individual will agree that if that reduces taxes, that surely is the right thing to do. He's going to introduce tariffs that could, of course, instigate countermeasures, but the idea of tariffs is that you know they tax third countries rather than US citizens working in the US. So
Yeah.
they transfer their tax elsewhere. And yes, that could prompt a trade war, which helps no one. But in fairness to Trump, you look at the balance of payments, China really needs to do something about it so it's more fair, more balanced. Um, so yeah, it's I have to say, you're right. We're just entering a consultation period. Everything can change, or some things will change, but it's a bit frightening how they've gone in, you know, gun ho, trying to tax anything and everything that moves, not having a feel for the different classes, not knowing what distinguish between working and middle class, um, just increasing the tax burden, but without giving due thought to the fact that next year there will be a smaller tax base because people will have left. And yeah, what is surprising to me is that the Conservatives, and look, the Conservatives' track record of the last 10 years leaves a lot to be desired. But when they first introduced the idea of transitioning from a domicile to a residency regime, quite sensibly, their view was, first we're going to consult, and after the consultation period is over, we will make a decision how we're going to introduce this.
Yeah.
Labour have done it the inverse, yeah? This is what we're doing, and now let's enter a short consultation period to make little adjustments here and there, if anything. I mean, that doesn't come across as a government that is fit for government. I mean, they've come in, you know, all guns blazing, just introducing measures with no consideration. And that's a frightening thought. I mean, I spoke to a client of ours that moved to Gibraltar from the UK not so long ago. I think it's 18 months ago. And he described, senior cabinet ministers as imbeciles running the show. And maybe this is harsh language, but anyone who's in the UK and they've built their net worth working extremely hard over 30, 40 years, understandably, they're going to be really annoyed that their hard-earned money they've grown and paid tax on is going to be taxed even more heavily. So then the money is misspent on public services. It instills no confidence in the UK PLC, and people are now seriously considering their options in terms of residency destinations. So the budget has been, yeah, I think it's been a shocker for many individuals.
Very aggressive for an autumn budget. You would have thought maybe they would have brought in some measures in this budget, their first budget, the autumn one, which tends to be lighter, let that filter through the system. Maybe even if they use the right communication that, look, we're going to have to do more in the spring, and then that gives them a lot more time to go through the consultation period to, they're new to government and understand it. But it's interesting the comparison between the UK and, okay, it's not a budget in the US, but what they're introducing, and it's almost taxation versus growth, isn't it? And yeah, it's interesting to see the two different approaches.
I mean, the approaches couldn't be more different. One of them is saying, okay, we've got a deficit problem. We need to address it. How do we address it? We either tax or we become more efficient. And to be honest, Matt, for people who are in business, it's almost a it's a no-brainer. There's no discussion. Look at your overheads. What can you cut to make yourself more efficient?
Mhm.
Yes, it means that there's a smaller public service, but I think most countries will admit that their public services relative to the private sector is far too big. Um, so they're cutting costs rather than taxing you. And by cutting costs, it means that the economies, and by freeing the economy of red tape, is going to grow faster. It means that people's um, standard of living is going to increase. So completely different approach. And look, if this was Neil Kinnock in the 1980s, or the one that came, Michael Foot, I think his name was,
Yeah.
and you would say, oh, okay. But I thought, with Tony Blair, that even with Gordon Brown, that Labour were more of a centre party. But these guys have come from, I don't know. Some of their ideas are shocking to the average UK national, middle
Yeah.
class family build their wealth. I think it shocks them to the core. I've
Yeah.
even spoken to working class people and they've said, Christ Almighty, I spoke to some friends and they said, you know what we need, Paul, in the UK? And I said, no, what? I said, we need Margaret Thatcher. We need a an individual of that character to come in and rock the boat and get us on the right path. So yeah, and you're absolutely right. You would poke your toe in the water, you come in gently, and you gradually increase your taxes. You don't do that, in the autumn budget, or you at least you would wait until April and understand a bit more what your options are. It doesn't
Yeah.
come across as a government that you can trust.
No, I mean the inheritance tax on the farmers, that one is because I think they've identified that there are some people buying farms and they use them as an inheritance tax, avoidance. I think Jeremy Clarkson is a famous one, and he's come out now, and people have. I think he actually said a few years ago, "This is why I bought it." I think he did a TV show and everything. And if they want to do something about people, buying farms to get outside inheritance tax, that's fine. But then to tax every single farm and then put the livelihood, and as you say, these are people supplying food stuff in the UK. It's almost like I guess for me, it's a bit like that saying, what is that, a sledgehammer to crack a nut sort of situation. Whereas maybe they could have put a lot of more thought into it and said, look, we're going to introduce this. And, if the farmer's been in their family for a long time, or if it's a working farm and those people are employed, something along those lines, a bit more thought. And I think it would have been a lot more palatable to people. And I think that's something that's really actually not going to create that much tax, but it's really shown their colours, I guess.
I think there was a massive demonstration in London last week
I think there
complaining
was, yeah.
about that. And you're right, they could have drawn a distinction between investing in a farm, like Jeremy Clarkson, to avoid tax, blatant in your face, and he even says so publicly. And then, farmers that, the land has been in their possession over centuries or whatever, how many generations they are farming, they should have been had an exemption. And then people who are avoiding IHT, those should have been taxed. And surely they can word the legislation in such a way that they distinguish between the two groups to make sure that they tax those who are deliberately using, investing in farms purely for tax exemptions.
Yeah.
It could have been done. They haven't given it any thought, Matt. It's just, um, I think that I don't know how long they've been in government, a couple of months, if that, and yeah, I think they're already antagonizing, you know, and antagonizing everyone really. What chance do they stand to complete the term at this rate? The people have no confidence, and the only reason they got into power is because the Tories are unelectable,
Yeah.
and there's no choice. And what worries me is I was talking to some friends in the UK over the weekend, and they're saying, the next election I'll vote for UK reform. It's
Yeah.
pushing people towards the Reform Party, which is dangerous. But they've got no choice. They've lost trust in the Conservatives. Labour have proven in a short period of time that they are not fit for government, and people are being pushed towards the Reform Party, which is a, a disaster waiting to happen.
Yeah. I don't know
So
if you saw at the weekend, Paul, but someone's created a petition, is one of these, and it's
I
to
saw
call
that
for a general election. And of course, it's a bit of a waste of time. I don't think it's going to lead to anything. But I checked this morning. I think they were on over 2 million.
1 million.
They're over 2 million now signatures.
Because I saw at one
So
point it
yeah,
was over a million. Thought,
yeah,
wow, this is
yeah,
taking off. I
yeah.
mean, this is unprecedented. I don't think we've ever had an election in the UK, but correct me if I'm wrong, Matt, where people are already saying, okay, we voted Labour, but I think this is a big mistake. 2 million is, and this is just quite recent. What is it going over the weekend? And it's
I
gaining
only
track.
heard of it over the weekend, yeah.
Yeah,
So I think it's gaining traction. So, but I think yeah, but I guess the positive, well, is it positive news? But for those who are in a position where they've thought about relocating, if it's to Gibraltar, somewhere like Spain or Portugal, maybe they're accelerating their plans a little bit, and that's where we can help people out. Yeah,
definitely.
yeah. Also, so there'll be more reaction to the budget. I think we'll have another video maybe early in 2025. But I think if you are thinking of relocating, it may be time to start your plans now. And if you're looking for trusted advisors to help you with that, feel free to reach out. We'd love to talk to you. But for now, goodbye.
Thank you.
Bye bye.
Goodbye.